Welcome to our CyberWise Chats, where we talk about the challenges of raising and teaching digital kids. I'm Diana Graber, author of Raising Humans in a Digital World and founder of CyberWise and CyberCivics. Join every episode with Dr. Pamela Rutledge, who's the director of the Media Psychology Research Center. Our always lively conversations tackle topics like cyberbullying, screen time, TikTok, and everything in between. We've got some great guests and promise each chat will give you the tips, tricks, and confidence you need to help kids use technology safely and wisely. All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today, whether you're here on the live webinar or listening to us afterwards on the podcast or webinar. We're really happy to have you. I'm Diana Graber. I'm the author of Raising Humans in a Digital World, helping kids build a healthy relationship with technology, and also the founder of CyberWise and CyberCivics. Here as always with Dr. Pamela Rutledge, who, as you know, is the director of the Media Psychology Research Center, and CJ Lindsay, who is our resident kids media expert. He's also the manager of editorial strategy at HBO Max. And something you may not know, he is also the author of a book called Growing Up and Growing Old, a battle only a superhero can win, which ironically is almost directly in line with what we're going to talk about today, which is parasocial relationships and what they mean to your kids. So without further ado, from Disney characters to YouTubers and Instagram celebrities, kids can develop deep emotional connections with media characters and personalities all over the place today. It's not just movies and films, but oftentimes, as you'll learn today, it's on social media, specifically YouTube. These are called parasocial relationships, and they're one-sided to kids, but they also influence them quite deeply. And we'll talk about how that is and how they develop and how it's different from when they're little until they get older. But first, let's start with the definition, because what we learned by titling this webinar is that a parasocial relationship doesn't sound that interesting, but it actually really is. So Pam, can you take a moment and explain to us exactly what that means?
Sure, Diana, although you sort of touched on the main points. Parasocial means like almost social. So in other words, it's describing a relationship that is different from our normal social relationships. It's a one-sided relationship in which the audience member or the user or the child feels very connected with a public figure or a media character, but they don't know them personally, but they have the sense that they are in fact friends. And you can hear it called a lot of different things, but they all describe that feeling of connection and attachment to someone in the media. It could be an actor, it could be an athlete, could be another performer, or if you're a teen, it could be an influencer on YouTube or TikTok. Or if you're young, as CJ is going to go through, it could be an animated character. Don't think this is just for kids. Everyone has some experience of a parasocial relationship in terms of who you like to see, who you're familiar with, who makes you feel good. So they're all different degrees, but it's a very common phenomenon, but one that's very influential.
Yeah, and Pam, before I move on to CJ, don't you think this really blew up during COVID? Because so many of us were isolated at home. And so all of a sudden our relationships went from the real world to the screen world. And I think, as you said, it wasn't just for kids, but for us as well.
Oh, absolutely. You know, researchers started looking at this back in the 1950s just because TV was so popular at that point. It became widely accepted. And so the faces of people started showing up in living rooms. And they started noticing that people felt connected because they had been having these experiences. With COVID and with the use of all that use of media, people were streaming, they were sharing, had 24/7 access to ways to feel connected. And in fact, the research shows that people who did stay connected, even with the media characters, felt much less isolated and much less lonely than people who did not. In fact, Friends and The Office were the most downloaded TV shows during COVID because they made people feel like they were with friends.
Yeah, isn't that funny? These old shows. All right, so I want to start with our littlest viewers. And CJ, you work in kids programming every single day. So can you talk to us a little bit about who kids are connecting with and why?
Yeah, so this is so if you're having kind of a hard time understanding, it's basically if you look at what Mickey Mouse, Goofy, Donald Duck, if you walk around Disneyland and you see someone dressed up as this character walking around talking to kids, that's essentially what this is. So even still, anything with fairy dust and mouse ears, Disney is incredible at creating characters that kids feel really connected to and feel like they have a relationship with. Another one is Sesame Street. Those have been around a long time. Elmo, or like Big Bird, Oscar, anybody from Sesame Street is really good at kind of developing these relationships. Dora the Explorer, Blues from Blue's Clues. Those are kind of like the legendary ones that have been around a long time. As well as Spider-Man. There's specifically Spider and His Amazing Friends show that Spider-Man is really young. It's for kind of that preschool age. There's been a lot of Spider-Man remains the top selling superhero of all time, with Batman being number 2 to a lot of people's surprise. Some of the newer names that kids are really connecting with right now, Blippi started on YouTube, preschooler. It's just a really enthusiastic guy that talks to the camera, talks to the kids through the camera. He has blown up TV shows, all that, as well as pretty much any character from Paw Patrol. Chase in particular kind of indexes super high as a character that kids attach to. And then probably one of the biggest and one of the most significant ones in recent kids TV is Bluey, and every member of the family in Bluey that I think kids get attached to, as well as I think parents may, if they realize it or not, kind of develop a parasocial relationship with the parents in Bluey, because they're such kind of main characters that interact with their kids in a way the viewer wants to interact with their own.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned Blue's Clues, and we talked about this earlier, but my own kids love Blue's Clues. And when Steve, the main character there, announced he was going to go off to college, my kids were so depressed. They were because it was like their buddy was leaving, and they're like, "Whoa, he's going to college."
Yeah, I was equally as depressed. And he actually recently, I think it was for the Blue's Clues 25th anniversary, the actor who played the original Steve came back, and he did a video that I actually just rewatched right before recording. That is this heartfelt. He is addressing basically like millennial age, and saying, hey, you know how I left? I know that was like really hard, but I got to go off and do some really cool stuff, and you did too, and I'm really proud of you, and I want you to keep going. And I've seen it like 4 times, and it just hits the heart, because he was my best friend growing up, so those relationships last.
Yeah. So Pam, I want to ask you a question. I know you have so much to say about this, but I remember when I was writing my book, doing research about how kids, when they're really young, there's a certain age when these media characters are like real people. They can't distinguish them from reality. And I know that shifts as kids get older, but what is that age? Do you remember that research?
Well, kids start becoming more concrete in their thinking around the age of 7, which is why we see a lot of these age groups like 2 to 6, and then 7 to 12. One thing I wanted to point out, though, about CJ's examples is all of those characters aren't just on TV. They have dolls, they have games, they have costumes, they have all kinds of ways that kids can interact with them and be part of their world, which really, yeah, right. Well, if they're, yeah, exactly. But even kids as young as the age of 2 can name and talk about their favorite media characters. But they're really looking at them as friends. It isn't aspirational as it becomes later when they grow up, but it becomes it's about friendship, and it's about seeing them as people, even if they're animated or even if they're Mickey Mouse. Does Mickey get hungry? Yes, Mickey gets hungry. Mickey's my friend. So it's that sort of beginning level of social realism where they're starting to think about what's going on with other people. But I haven't made that distinction between what's real and not real. When I say that, I worry that parents are going to think this is a bad thing. This is a normal part of development, to make those distinctions between real and not real. That's why Monsters Under the Bed is so scary.
Yeah. And I want to just mention this real quick because I forgot to say it at the beginning. I've got the chat box open. So if anyone has a question as we go along, please feel free to stick it in there, and I will promise I will address it. So CJ, talk about that a little bit. Do you find that kids like are like thinking these people are real up to a certain point? Like, what is the positive and negative of all this?
Yes, and I think it happens more often with kids, but it can kind of happen with like anybody. I fully recognize that Superman is not a real character,
What?
but I know I am Superman. But the actual like the influence of the character is incredibly real. And it's all, I mean, I could keep lifting these up for days. I have Superman stuff all over the place. So like, yes, the kind of the understanding that the characters aren't actually, you know, real. These are media characters. For young kids, and then kind of as you get older, there is somewhat of a blurred line when the person is real, right? And so you have these influencers that like that's their actual name, and you get to see behind the curtain into their actual life. And so yes, not real, but also like the influence of it, and kind of the effect of the person, character, media personality is definitely something. It's a real influence in the life.
Yeah. So as kids get more towards elementary school, do you see the characters that they associate with shift when it comes to popular movies and videos?
Definitely. And as you kind of get older, just like the preference in content, where it kind of goes from preschool to kind of traditional animation to then kind of live action, the people, the characters that kids kind of attach to do the same thing. Where, you know, younger, you got like SpongeBob or Gumball from the Amazing World of Gumball. But then it starts like in elementary school, you know, late elementary school, it really starts to shift towards social media and specifically YouTube.
Yeah.
And so you have like Dude Perfect right now. There's 5 guys on there that you know, they reach kids. It's like from 6 to 18 is their audience. It's really broad, but as young as 6 years old, kids will binge Dude Perfect content. And then that's really when superheroes come in as well, and really like start to solidify is that kind of early elementary and throughout elementary school. You know, and a huge thing to consider with all of this is like socially within the friend group of these kids, like who is popular, because it becomes like a point of connection. So if you have a bunch of friends that are into a certain, you know, channel, show, whatever it is, you are way more likely to get into it and become attached because it's brought so much value into your social life.
Right. And Pam, why do you think that is in elementary school that kids become attached specifically to superheroes, as CJ mentioned?
Well, there's a big shift when you go from those early years to the 7 to 12-year-olds, and they start paying more attention to um, models of how to behave or how to be. So they're much more likely to pick a role model or a media character that is of the same gender. And they're really looking at attributes that are aspirational, wishful identification. So superheroes are really about empowerment, and so it's a very logical thing that kids, as they're growing up and they're trying to figure out how to make their way in the world, would want to connect with someone who has no problems navigating their daily world. But even characters like Harry Potter or Hermione Granger, a lot of kids really relate to them. Yes, they're totally fictional, but they normalize certain things in kids' lives, like whether it's a struggle like Harry or Hermione, who's being marginalized for being intelligent. So they pick these characters that help them think about themselves in different ways, and and help them grow and more maturely. And a lot of people worry about parasocial relationships impairing real relationships, but that's really an overstated worry. It's very rare, and for the most part, as CJ was saying, and that's a super important point, that it allows people to become part of a fan group. These parasocial connections create a sense of affiliation and membership, just like if they were football fans or basketball fans. There's really no difference. It allows them to share experience, and there's almost nothing more powerful than that.
Yeah, and I think that really underscores how it's so different today, because kids can connect with these characters via the internet. They can be in these fan clubs. Oftentimes, especially as they reach get towards to being teens, a lot of the people that they love are influencers that are on Instagram and Snapchat and all those places. So the kids can often like have direct communication with them, which could never happen before. So there's just so many different ways to connect today that I think make these relationships so much deeper.
Not only that, Diana, but there are some technical things. And, CJ, I know you spend all day long worrying about these things, but there are some technical things that really reinforce a parasocial relationship, especially with influencers. And they do it in children's television too. The characters look, or the media person looks right at the camera. They speak right to the audience. And from the audience's perspective, just like CJ was moved by the message from Steve, it feels in the brain like a real person. So you respond emotionally, not just cognitively. The influencers, the media person, YouTube celebrities, they talk right to the audience. They have facial close ups so that you can really see their emotion. And they're very high emotional valence events. They are also full of information. If you look at any of these YouTube videos that we're going to be talking about, they aren't just a person talking. They're putting up signs. There's words floating by. There's pictures of albums. There's pictures of characters that they're talking about. It's very full in terms of
Immersive,
visual
very
content.
immersive, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a very, even if you thought the person was boring, the entire experience would have some engagement value. So it's a very interesting thing that social media has unleashed in terms of this media richness that enhances this connection.
Right. And I was surprised because I just recently, when I went in to teach sixth graders, I asked them, who do you like? What kind of media character do you like? And everyone they mentioned comes off of YouTube, which is no surprise. There was a research study done just a few months ago that determined that by and large, YouTube is the #1 social media site that kids use. 95% of teens use YouTube. In addition to that, 1 in 5 claim to use it almost constantly, which I'm still trying to figure out how that's even possible because almost constantly, and like supposedly they're in school, right? So anyway, YouTube is huge. The influencers that they yelled out at me, and I ask them this periodically, and it always changes. But this year, the huge one is Mr. Beast. So, and I want to spend a minute talking about him because I think it's really unique. And maybe this is kind of our motto for the day. Like these people are largely positive, these people that our kids are connecting with. Mr. Beast is an unusual one because he gives away a ton of money to charity. And I think maybe CJ, you might know a little bit more about him than I learned from my students, but why don't you step in here and tell us a little bit, what is the allure with this Mr. Beast dude?
Yeah, so Mr. Beast is a low-key genius in that he kind of hacked what YouTube like kind of attention economy, and he has basically eventized charity. He's eventized giving away things. So he draws in just massive numbers. He's one of the biggest YouTube channels ever. He recently got an offer for somebody to buy his YouTube channel for $1 billion that he turned down. And the videos are things like if you can, the most recent one was last person to take their hand off this private jet gets to keep it, right? Like it's like a massive. He ordered a pizza and to a house and gave the house to the delivery man. It's like these just gigantic things, and he eventizes it, so it's a lot of fun. It's also worth noting that Mr. Beast did so much so quickly that he became kind of the template for a successful attention grabbing YouTube channel. So even some of these names that we're going to mention that are big on YouTube, they construct the editing, the ideas, the attention grabbing kind of formula based off what Mr. Beast did. He's kind of an influencer among influencers, and is really big. But the point that I love about Mr. Beast is that he's a very simple person. He's not pulling up in his videos in a Maserati and, with hundreds of thousands of dollars on his wrists and, accessories. He's a really simple guy, and he gives away money. He has foundations. He really is talking about this communal thing of what social media can bring to the world as a uplifting thing. It's really, really cool.
Yeah,
if you don't know him, check him out.
I just think like, look at where we are today with adult social media, where there's so much infighting and just meanness. And I think we don't even take a really deep look into like what's resonating with the kids. And what I'm learning from the kids that I'm around, it's like they know that some people can make a lot of money as influencers on social media. Now the next step is they know that those people can also use that money to do really amazing things in this world. And that's cool. And that's what I was hearing from students who are like, Mrs. Graber, you're not going to believe this guy plants trees. He gives away so much money. It is so awesome. So I love seeing that evolution. And I don't think enough parents know that it's happening in social media. And Pam, maybe you can speak to that because we were talking earlier about how, obviously the headlines go to the negativity, but there's so many positive role models, especially for teens right now.
Absolutely, and I think what's really interesting to me is that it really speaks to the sort of maturity of social media. Initially the ones that were getting all the hits were people, falling on their face or, you know, dumping things on their head. And now people are starting to be much more discerning of content. And I think we undersell this generation of kids because, like you're reporting, Diana, there's a lot of concern about, doing things right, social justice, giving to others. And so in that sense, it's really nice to know that Mr. Beast has caught on so well because he's managed to put sort of energy and excitement into, but still the fundamental message is giving away. And that's such a powerful message for teens who developmentally are very self-focused.
Mhm.
And so if they have influencers like Mr. Beast, it really offsets a lot of the other kinds of concerns that parents would have about learning bad behaviors, bad language, taking stereotypical social scripts like what it means to be a man or what it means to be a woman, or interfering with life relationships. They're really lessons that are applicable in the real world that kids do translate into real life.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. The other thing that came up when I was talking to students is a lot of these gamers that are also influencers because, as you know, kids love gaming and so they like to watch the big gamers. A couple that came up were Unspeakable. You probably have heard of him, I imagine, CJ, but pretty positive. His YouTube channel is all about having a good time. Dream, who's another Twitch streamer and gamer. He does stuff based on Roblox. Is it he the Roblox? Oh, no, I'm sorry, Minecraft content. So he's all about here's what I make on Minecraft. Isn't it so cool? So again, a lot of things that kids love, and they love the people who are out there showing others how to do it. So pretty cool.
And it's not just entertainment, they're actually learning.
Yeah.
When our daughter was 4, she used to watch YouTube videos of people playing with Play-Doh, and then she would learn new Play-Doh techniques. And so when kids are connected to these influencers, they learn much more, for better or for worse. But for the most part, they're really gravitating to these people that have a really strong and powerful message, because the other kind of message doesn't have longevity, right? It's like flash and you're done. Whereas these larger messages like Mr. Beast really have staying power.
Yeah. I'm going to circle back because I made myself a big note in our notes about something I forgot to ask about because it's always perplexed me, but unboxing videos are still really big with kids that are little. And that's really different than what we're talking about right now. And I've always tried to figure out what is about the unboxing that is so appealing to young children.
Well, unboxing videos are exactly what appeals to the human brain, right? There's anticipation. You're holding up something. If you're a kid watching one of these videos, first of all, you picked an unboxer that's going to open something that you care about, right? So if you're Ryan's toy review or or one of those things, so there's all this anticipation, and then they slowly open it up, right? And then they share, the mystery is solved, and then they play with it, right? So you get to see what it would be like, not only to be surprised, but to have that experience. So they're a tremendous way to sell toys.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to make sure that we circled back and talked about that before we moved on to the YouTubers for the older kids. So CJ, who have I forgotten that's big with the teens right now?
I kind of want to bring it back to so Dude Perfect specifically
Yeah.
because I kind of want to talk about like sponsorship, and
Yes.
so parasocial relationships, one of the big things, and it honestly has been kind of something that has been painted in a really negative light, which is this ability that these influencers have to sell products, right? Because it has been proven that if you have a kind of one-sided relationship with a character, they can influence your purchasing behavior. And sometimes, most of the time, especially kids, probably aren't even aware that they're being influenced by that. So it sounds scary, I understand, but there are some pretty amazing influencers out there that understand this power, and Dude Perfect is one of them. They early on, they got an offer for $2 million before they even had like regular sponsors, for $2 million for a beer company. And they didn't say which beer company, but one of the big ones. And they knew that their main audience was around the age of 14. And so they decided to turn it down, which was brutal for them. And luckily for them, a couple weeks later, they said it wasn't even 2 months later that they got an offer from Nerf for $4 million for a similar thing. And they took that, and Nerf has been a long time sponsor for Dude Perfect. So yes, it can be kind of overwhelming to know that the influencers can kind of influence the purchasing behavior and what kids want. But honestly, there's a side of it that's advantageous to show kids the things that will appeal to them and things that they want to have. So Nerf guns for 14-year-old boys, sure, absolutely, let's do it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of positive in that space.
Yeah, and I think it's important to mention that the mission of these Dude Perfect dudes is really to spread good around the world. Their message of power, of faith, and friendship is the heart of everything they do. That's directly off of their site. So, not terrible for our kids to be watching people like that.
Yeah.
There was another one too that came up. Well, this is one that's a couple years old. Charlie D'Amelio, you probably have heard of her. She's a creator on TikTok, and she does lip syncing videos, a lot of dancing, etc. A couple years ago, she was really huge, but she also got embroiled in a little bit of a scandal where they felt like she had plagiarized someone else's song. And so I actually was able to use that in one of our copyright lessons in cyber civics, and the kids knew all about it. Like, yeah, that song sounds just like this song. It's a total violation of copyright. So these things, just to remind any teachers that happen to be listening, all of these things that we're talking about today have teachable moments. So please take an opportunity to be open-minded about what kids are looking at and what they're learning, and maybe use it in the classroom to teach other lessons.
We've got a question, Diana, who the parent says, as a parent, she worries that online relationships are much easier than real ones, and whether that means it's going to harm offline or real relationships. And I want to put your mind at ease. No, it doesn't harm them. It's very, very rare that a child will have parasocial relationships that supersede any kind of real life experience. Most of the time, they are providing a sense of safety and comfort. They're providing a sense of what's normal, and they are most often shared with other friends. It's very rare to have a kid do anything by themselves without involving their friends, but certainly not who they watch on the media. So it becomes actually a bonding experience, as CJ was describing earlier. And so not something that you should worry about how they navigate real relationships. One thing I would like to point out is that some of these YouTube videos, just like taxi drivers learn to speak English from NPR, there are an awful lot of kids coming into the country who don't speak English very well, and they're using these things to actually learn how to speak and to learn how to talk and to learn how to make friends and how to be part of this culture, this society. So they're really serving a lot of different purposes that are, for the most part, positive. Can I mention one other thing that parents worry about? Is it all right to do that?
Can I hop on and
Yeah.
answer
Oh,
somewhat
sure.
this question, and then we'll come back to that. So I can tell you that online relationships are much easier than real ones. Yes, like to an extent. I will say that growing up, I loved comic books, but that wasn't like a cool thing. So I kind of hid my comic books under my bed. And didn't talk to friends about it at all. That's like a nerd, way too nerdy of a thing. This was, before the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And then I had an opportunity to go to a Comic-Con. And I'm going to say that all of the parasocial relationships that I developed with these superheroes immediately at Comic-Con translated to connection with just everybody in every room I went in. And so just to kind of emphasize what Pam was saying in a personal way, and it's actually what my book is about, as far as using the media characters to kind of frame how I saw the world and how I developed relationships and how I intook life lessons and understanding like loyalty within the context of Captain America stories, and understanding what hope was through Superman. Like it provided way more connection in my life, especially once I kind of embraced it, than harming. It didn't harm really anything, other than I was like embarrassed I loved comic books. But like it was, I know now it's okay. Now it's actually really cool. Has helped me become very successful in my job, which is wonderful. But like it is not something I would say that's not really something, like Pam said, extremely rare that these become kind of isolating relationships. By necessity, they are very socially driven, not only with the character, but with everybody around you who kind of loves that character too.
Yeah. And even kids who have other interests, like what I learned from talking to students is there's a couple or personalities on YouTube they really like that are sports related because they love sports. And so they do basketball together. And there's a guy named Jesser, who's an American YouTuber best known for his basketball and challenge videos. Kids who like to run, there's Ryan Traham, who's a big runner who is also a popular YouTuber. So again, a lot of these things either support what they're doing offline or vice versa. So it's these outside communities of kids who love something. There's an influencer that speaks directly to that. So, that's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, and if you want to worry about something with all of this social media, then the things to worry about are the ability of social media to establish unrealistic expectations
Yeah.
about life, or about wealth, or about looks, and that sort of negative social comparison. That is one of the things that makes it really important for parents to become involved with kids, to understand who their influencers are, who they're interested in, who they think are cool and amazing, who their friends watch, so that you can understand the messages that are inherent in these different kinds of things. As you've been hearing, most of the kids that we're running into aren't really following those people in the same way. But it doesn't mean that seeing somebody who's amazingly beautiful or amazingly rich doesn't have an impact. So it's really important for parents to get involved and to kind of offset that.
Yeah, it's funny because my mind goes to the Kardashians, and I think that their followers are probably people much older than what we're talking about, right? So maybe we need to do a separate chat for that. Okay, we've come to the time of wrap up. I think we all have takeaways that we'd like to throw out for today. Pam, I'll start with you.
Well, the first one is to just reiterate that parasocial relationships are a feeling of an attachment to a media character. They are perfectly normal. They are experienced by almost everyone. It is not weird. It is not pathologic. So be careful if your kids are talking about an influencer. Don't make fun. Don't undermine angst if they have to break up with their parasocial relationship because he goes off to college or cancels his YouTube channel. They feel really real to kids. They play an important social function, so it's an important thing to be involved in, and to encourage healthy bonds that allow them to take skills offline.
Okay. And CJ, what would you take away from today?
I kind of the big emphasis that I want to leave is that parasocial relationships are really interesting in that they don't breed jealousy. And they're, like a real, real relationship. You can sometimes be like possessive over this is my person, this is my mom, this is my whatever friend. You can't be friends with them too. Not the case with parasocial relationships. They are naturally like a social thing, like we were talking about. And so for parents to kind of get involved with the characters or media personalities or influencers that their kids love, it provides an opportunity for bonding and like to add a level of, a new kind of element to your relationship that not a lot of media does. And so to kind of consider getting, doing your best to get into the relationship that your kids have yourself, to be able to, coach them through the influence that character will have, or that media personality will have in their life.
Right. And I'm going to try to give my takeaways in conjunction to answer a question that just came in because it's an important question. Wondering how you would all approach teaching teens discernment between positive and negative parasocial relationships. For example, a Mr. Beast versus Andrew Tate, or even QAnon becoming so dominant on YouTube. Clearly, there's a line, but how do you explain things belong political values? So there's a lot in that question, but it kind of goes in line. What I was going to recommend is I was surprised at how many of these influencers happen on YouTube. I mean, largely they're all from YouTube. And so a couple things to answer that question. What I always tell parents is like, if you have well, first of all, watch with your kid, find out what they're watching. If you are concerned and they're not talking to you about it, you can actually go to their YouTube account and look at their history and see who they're watching. If you've got a sneaky child and they erase their history, you can look at their recommended videos because what they're being recommended is based on what they've watched. And I think that's really important because what I'm concerned about, especially kids who aren't learning media literacy in school, is that they can fall down rabbit holes without even knowing that that's happening. For example, if they have an interest or curiosity in a topic, they watch one video, YouTube's algorithm says, hey, this kid really likes this. So I'm going to give them 10 more videos of the exact same. And so, a curious kid about maybe QAnon, for example, might fall down that rabbit hole. So it's important for you to know about that. And that, what I just told you, you can do that on YouTube to find out about more. That should never replace talking, but you can still go in there and kind of take a look at what they're looking at. So that was part of my answer, was anyway going to be about YouTube, to learn more about it, to watch it with your child. But secondly, honestly, my big surprise is the names I was hearing from kids were largely positive. Some of them I'm going to keep watching because I thought, wow, what a great, interesting person. And what this made me realize today is that we really need to do a chat that's just about influencers. There's so many of them and they're all very different. We just scratched the surface today of the ones that kids are really attached to. So we'll do that in a future chat. And then in regards to future chats, our next one will be December 15th. I'm kind of excited about it. We are getting asked so much about the Wait Till 8th campaign that maybe some of you have heard about. So our chat is going to be about don't just wait until 8th, educate. So we're going to talk about the pluses and minuses of waiting till 8th and what you can do before 8th grade and after. So that'll be in a month. And before I leave, CJ, you have really two great resources for parents regarding this topic, your book and the podcast. If you could just give a minute to tell them where they can find both and what both offer.
Yeah, so the podcast is The Parent's Guide to What Kids Watch. It is actually, the most recent episode was on YouTube, kind of as a whole. They're kind of short episodes where I just dive into current things within the kids media space. It's the tagline, if you will, is to help parents know what kids are watching, where they're watching it, and what it all means. And that is, wherever you listen to podcasts, that's going to be there. And then, yeah, my book, Growing Up versus Growing Old, About Only a Superhero Can Win. It's actually written for kind of teenagers, and that age group, and helping them understand that, these things that they loved as a kid. They don't necessarily have to leave them all behind, because they did teach them specific things in their childhood that will stick with them as they grow older. So I use the example of superheroes in my life, and how I have come to be the man I am today, largely based off of this combination of superheroes and my parents. And how kids can kind of do the same as they enter the world and step away from home, and they have these kind of external influences, and how to make it internal. So it's the parasocial relationships and the power that they can have in your life is something I'm really passionate about. So a lot of the things that I write about or talk about or podcasts I do kind of stem around this topic. So I had a blast today. So thank you for letting me be a part of it.
Well, and CJ, let me just compliment you on your book. It's a great book. It's a great read. And maybe if your teenagers don't read, no problem, but read it yourself, because it will help you see your childhood in a different way. That, like CJ was talking about, it gives some context to all of these things that you were interested in, and the things that you were fans of. And you go, oh, that was actually a really useful thing to do.
Well, thank you, Pam. Yeah, that's wonderful. I appreciate it.
It's on Amazon.
Yeah.
It is on Amazon.
Yeah. So great conversation, you guys. It was one of those conversations where I think the title doesn't sound very exciting, but when you start talking about it, we could talk probably for another hour, but we don't have another hour. So we're going to wrap it up here, and hope to see you all next time, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.